Hey folks, this is Paul. I'm talking about A Course in Miracles, and had sort of a subject in mind, but it wasn't quite well formed. So I was asking the Holy Spirit, what is the real focus here? And he says murder. So it's talking about the ego's thought system and why it's murderous, and why that is different to the Holy Spirit's thought system, and where does the golden rule tie into this? The golden rule is a law of God which governs reality. It's based on the principle that God only creates in his likeness. So he only creates that which is basically identical in nature to himself. And everything that he creates has that same quality, that same ability, that same freedom, creativity, power. And so all of his creations are essentially identical in their nature. And so then you could basically say whatever applies to one of his creations must also apply to the exact same fullness to another of his creations. So, and this sets up the golden rule, this law of God, that everything in heaven is in the likeness and image of God. This is what oneness is based on. Everything is of one nature. And so whatever applies over here, applies over there, applies to you, applies to me equally, and it's all based on equality. There's an equality of what is true of me and what is true of you. And there's an equality of giving and receiving. There's an equality of cause and effect. And when you're in accord with the law of the golden rule, you're going to be happy and sane and be in Christ, whereby you will automatically know my brother is the same as me, so I'm going to treat him as I am treating myself. I can't think of him in any way that is different to how I think of myself. If I believe something is true, it's true of me and them, or it's true of neither of us. And this is very different to the ego system, because the ego doesn't do it that way. So in the golden rule, whatever is applies to the whole sonship. And this is the fundamental nature of the Holy Spirit's thought system, which is God's system, that whatever applies to you applies to the entire sonship at once, and you're completely equal with every brother, and it's perfect equality, perfect identicality, perfect sameness. For example, healing is when two minds perceive their oneness and become glad. And what that means is that the two minds that are two minds recognize the sameness and their equality and the perfect equalness and agreeability between them, and therefore they're glad and happy that there's nothing different about them. There's nothing that one has that the other doesn't have. There's no lack, there's no competition. So they're just happy to be identical. So in that system, it's not possible to say something is true of me and it's not true of you. It's not possible to say I have this and you don't have it, or you've done this thing and I didn't do it. if you're in perfect accord with the law of God, then you cannot help but have justification for only loving, because it's going to mean if I try to do something to a brother, and if I think that I can escape the consequences of what I do, if I can separate cause and effect, where I cause someone and effects are produced, but I don't receive the effects, they are the only one who receives the effects, and they don't seem to have causality. So now you're separating out cause and effect, and this is part of level confusion and the authority problem. You're now going into inequality, which is getting away with murder. So what it basically means is if you believe that cause and effect are separate, and so you can do something to someone and they can experience effects, but you're kind of immune from the effects, and that you're separated off from the effects, you're not affected by the things that you do, then you're automatically going to start thinking, yeah, there's stuff that can apply to that person that doesn't apply to me. They can be a dumping ground for my sin, and I can put it over there on them, and I can be free of it. There can be a separation between what applies to me and what applies to you. But when you're in the golden rule and you're obeying the rule, you have full awareness that whatever I do it to myself. Whatever is true of me is true of you. If I try to make something true of you, it's going to apply to me. I can't hurt you without hurting myself. And it kind of keeps the system in check, because if you're fully aware that whatever you try to do to another, you literally do it to yourself. You think that you're doing it to them, but you're really joining them in the suffering that you're causing. If you were in your right mind and you knew, if I do this, we're both going to suffer. If I do this, it's going to apply to both of us. If I have this attitude of attack, we're both going to be attacked. If you have that awareness and you're conscious and you're not in denial, you're going to know that there's nothing you can do to bring about an inequality without you being affected and without you getting hurt as well, without you suffering as well. So it automatically it kind of makes it impossible for you to see any sane reason why you would ever want to have something be true of someone else that's not true of yourself, or to separate cause and effect, because you know that's going to make you suffer. And if you're in this place of love and you don't want to suffer, and you're sane and you're in your right mind, you're not going to do things that hurt yourself. So it's going to be like, if I try to pin this on them, I'm going to feel it too. If I try to make them be guilty, I'm going to feel guilty. If it's true of them, it's true of me. So then your hands are kind of tied in that you cannot move an inch toward ego without both you and your brother suffering. You're included in, it's an inclusive system, you're included in the effects of whatever you cause and choose. There's no escape from it. So it's kind of like all you can do is love. The only thing you can do that is not gonna hurt you is love. I'm gonna love you, and therefore accept love for myself and receive love and stay in love. If I do anything else, I am gonna suffer. If I'm gonna try to hurt you, it will hurt myself. If I try to put sin onto you, it's gonna accuse me of sin. It's always, the golden rule is always applying. It is not optional. It never stops applying. Even when you go into ego, it's still applying. It's a permanent law of God that applies everywhere. And so when you try to go into ego, you basically go into this idea of inequality, specialness, selfishness, separation from others, separation of cause and effect. These are all different forms of this idea that something isn't quite the same for me as it is for you. Somehow there's a slight difference. There's a different rule, as if there's different rules for each of us, different laws. Because what that does, the ego takes this one law of the golden rule and it tries to separate it to make two laws, to say this law applies to me and that law applies to you, and therefore I'm exempt from your laws and you're exempt from my laws. And now you've got a system of conflicting laws, different values, disagreement, conflict, competition, and it's murderous. What is not love is murder. So even if you have just a slight inequality with your brothers, you're basically trying to say, there's something true of me that isn't really true of you, so we're different, which by itself is an attack. Just this insinuation that I'm this special son of God and you're not quite the same as me, so God likes me more. Jesus said, you were in your right minds and you had peace until you sought special favor. Because you and your brother existed as children of God in heaven before the separation, and then some of us sought to have special favor, like we wanted to have something just for me. We didn't want to share, didn't want to have equality, wanted to have something special, something selfish that I could say, this is only true of me and it's not true of you. God has given me this special something and you don't have it. That's what the whole ego system's based on, this inequality, this idea of the golden rule does not apply to me, which is denial, because it does apply. So then you go into this thought system based on separations, conflicting wills, being in two minds, and basically believing that you can have something be true of your brother that's not true of you. So now that now means I can attack you and you can suffer the consequences and I can be free of the consequences. That I can now, because of the inequality, what applies to you doesn't apply to me. So now you can suffer while I don't suffer. And that means now that I can cause you to suffer and die without me seeming to suffer and die. So that means I can get away with murder. That is the murderousness of the ego thought system. It's automatically built into the whole system of the ego in the way that it thinks, that even the slightest idea of us not being identical children of God who have everything equally and share everything the same, even the slightest hint of specialness, selfishness, differences, inequalities is a murderous idea. And it's the idea of death. You're trying to produce a state where basically attack is basically this sort of break. There was equality, and now there's this difference, and now the part in between here, where the two things are not really agreeing and they're going against each other and they're on different frequencies or whatever. Because the two things aren't the same now, they must disagree. So now the two things are against each other. This one's saying this is the truth, this one's saying this is the truth, and they don't line up. And so now they are not in agreement. Now there is discord and conflict and war because of this separation. And so that is attack. And so now the two parts are attacking each other just by the fact that they're different. And the whole ecosystem is based on this system of attacking, and any kind of difference is an attack. This is why this whole world, which is filled with differences, different forms, different bodies, different shapes, different colors, whatever, is all the idea of attack. Now, there's a line in the Course that says, "Those who are sick do not love themselves, for if they loved themselves, they would heal themselves." There's also a part about what you use the body for, it will become to you, and if you use it for attack, it becomes attacked, and it's weak, and it's sick, and it dies. If you use it to bring the word of God to those who have it not, then it becomes healed and healthy, and it cannot be sick or die. This is based in the Golden Rule situation, where, see, the fact is that the Golden Rule always applies, even when you're in denial of it, even when you're pretending that other laws apply, even when you've made up rules and said, these are the rules for me and these are the rules for you, the Golden Rule is still applying. So now you're in a state where you're believing that there's things you can do that will not hurt you in the same way that it hurts somebody else. There's things that you can do that you can get away with. And this is really, it starts with a split mind. It starts with denial, where this is the origin of all scapegoating. In your mind that was one, that was in the Golden Rule, becomes separate, becomes selfish, becomes different. The only way it can do that is to use denial, to try to shut out some portion of truth and focus on a different truth, so that now there's two parts to the mind. One of them is unconscious, hidden behind the denial, which is a block to awareness, and the rest of it that's conscious, you think is yourself. And now, because you do not see that your mind causes everything that you experience, you're now unaware of the connection between cause and effect. And now, when things are now happening as a result of your mind's causing, you don't see the process of your choosing it. You don't see the part of your mind that is causing suffering. And so now you look around and you think, well, who is doing this to me then, if I'm not the one doing this? And you have to now find a scapegoat. You have to now be able to try to make sense of it. You have to now project the cause away from yourself, because you don't have any awareness of having caused, and now it must be someone else's fault. And now you're being murderous. So those who are sick do not love themselves, because if they loved themselves, they would heal themselves. Got me thinking about if you reword this to say, if I don't love myself, I will attack myself. If I don't love myself, I'm going to be against myself. I'm going to be hating myself. And that's going to attack me, and it's going to make my body sick. And then my body's going to get sick and die. Those who do not love themselves fully must have some kind of attitude about themselves that they don't love themselves, and therefore they're self-loathing. They see themselves as unworthy, unforgivable, sinful, guilty, are against themselves, and are attacking. And that's kind of sobering, because it also indicates that the golden rule is still in effect, because now you get into these attack modes where you think that you're only attacking someone else. You think you're only judging another person. You think that you're exempt and separate from the consequences of your bad attitude, and yet you don't realize you're hurting yourself, because the golden rule is applying. So whatever you're seeming to accuse your brother of, you are accusing yourself of. Even if you're not aware, even if it seems like you don't believe that, even if it seems like even if it's like you're angry at someone and you're really hurling accusation at them, and it seems like they are the one who's wrong, and only they are the place where this one truth is, and it doesn't apply to you, so you're perfectly innocent and they're perfectly guilty. Even in that dynamic, which is based in ego, it's based in denial, unawareness of the golden rule, an attempt to pretend that the rule doesn't apply to you, you are hurting yourself. You cannot experience anger at another person and retain your peace of mind. You cannot hate and love at the same time. You cannot find somebody guilty while being innocent. If they're guilty, so are you. If they're innocent, so are you. But we get into these states that are so split-minded and so in denial and so removed from a proper awareness of the golden rule, not recognizing that what applies to me must be exactly equal to everyone else. We get into these states of inequality and differences, and I believe this and you don't, and I have the truth, no you don't, you have the truth, and you don't have it, I have it, and all these arguments and things that come out of that conflict, which is caused by that inequality, that separation. Your mind can get into that state where you don't realize that you're hurting yourself, and you think that you're getting away with being able to pin the blame and the sin and the guilt on someone else. They're wrong, they've done something, they're mistaken, you're holier than thou. So it's all their fault. And always convinced that it's not me, it's them. That is separation. That is a denial of the golden rule, that is trying to believe that something is true of them and it's not true of me. So whatever I'm thinking about them, I'm not thinking it about myself. Whatever I'm finding them to be guilty of, I'm not guilty of. And so now you're in ego. It's murderous, and it becomes murderous if you get into these like arguments online and stuff, and you're talking to people, and you start getting in that frame of mind of they're wrong and I'm right, and they're the one that's mistaken, not me, and I'm innocent but they're not. Look what they did, blah blah blah. That's definitely being in ego, because it's being in a state of mind where you don't actually see that you are accusing yourself of all the things that you're accusing them of. Now, I used to be confused about this, because some people would say whatever's true of someone else is true of you. And now that would seem to suggest if somebody else has a broken leg, I have a broken leg. And that is not correct. It seems to make sense as a kind of a oneness. It seems to imply the golden rule, but it's not on the level of form. If someone else has a broken leg, the form of their body is broken, doesn't mean that my body has a broken leg. The break in their leg doesn't apply to me. It's an illusion for both of us. But if I look at that person's body and I believe that their leg is really broken and they did something wrong and they're guilty for it, and they were foolish or whatever judgments, those perceptions of or interpretations of the broken leg do apply to myself. If any any truth that I think applies to them, besides the illusion of their form, must apply to me. So if I'm like, oh, it serves them right for they shouldn't have done such and such and they broke the leg, the stupid idiot, that content, that dynamic of that's true of them and not true of me, that guilt is true of them, not true of me, that is my self-attack, that's my ego pretending that that attack doesn't apply to me and it only applies to them, in order to stay unconscious of my own self-attack. And so the only reason that we attempt to accuse our brothers of sin is because you're unaware that when you do it, you are accusing yourself. You're unconscious of the aspect of this experience, this dynamic, where you actually get some effects. It affects your feelings. It makes you have reactions. It hurts you as much as it hurts the other person. And in those very projecting, denying, scapegoating moments, which are murderous, you may be so focused on trying to prove that the sin is out there and not in here, heavy denial, that you'll see yourself as innocent while the other person is very guilty. And the more you can make them be hated and wrong, the more you will experience yourself as if you are very pure and very holy and very innocent. You can get really deluded this is the face of innocence, that you're so a victim, so unfairly treated, so abused against your will, and it clearly was them, it's true of them only, that they only did this, I didn't do this. You can really get stuck in a perspective where you see yourself as completely free of sin, while the other person is fully sinful. And so then you think, I am innocent, I didn't ask for this, I didn't want this, they did it to me, blah, blah, blah. Completely unconscious of what you're doing to yourself. The secret of salvation is that you do it all to yourself. The secret of salvation acknowledges the golden rule and reminds you that you cannot escape it. So the funny thing is that you go into this denial thinking that the golden rule doesn't apply to me anymore. It's not in effect. I've escaped God's law. I'm outside of the law. I've gone above the law, and I've made up my own laws. And now you believe that you're getting away with stuff as if you're breaking the law. You're breaking God's law. You're getting away with murder. You're pulling off the getting rid of your sin onto someone else, and wringing your hands in glee that you're managing to really get rid of it and make it go away from you, put it on someone else, and you're totally unequal. They're the one where all the sin is. Thinking that you're exempt from the law, while not realizing that the law still applies. It's not escapable, it's not optional, and you actually must still be doing to yourself everything that you're doing to this person. But you don't, in such extreme states of denial, you don't have awareness or willingness or consciousness to even see and recognize in yourself how you're hurting yourself and how it's having an effect on you. If you get into a big argument with somebody and you feel all angry and hurt and stuff, and then afterwards you might feel regretful, and then you might even feel, I don't want to be this way. It feels crappy to argue. It feels hurtful and upsetting to try to be right. It feels it disturbs my peace, and I lose all of my peace by trying to make someone else wrong. So even though you think it was working, even though it doesn't work, even though you thought you were getting away with it, it still is having an effect on you, because whatever you think applies to them must apply to you as well, because of the golden rule, whether you're conscious of it or not. So if you're thinking that person's a really bad, guilty, sinful fucker, they did really bad, mean things to others, and they're really, really guilty, you are literally having to believe that about yourself. And you might feel righteous, and you might feel justified, and thinking that this stuff only is about them, and that you don't even experience effects. You actually can be in such denial that you think you're not in any way even upset, and you're not even getting any effects from this at all. And Jesus is mentioning karma. So this is kind of like the opposite of the golden rule is the idea of karma, which what this really means is that in the golden rule everything applies to both, and you do everything to yourself, giving and receiving are one. If you go into a state where you're in denial of that law, where you now think that you can do things to others and not yourself, that you can give without receiving, or you can receive without giving, which is getting. If you think you can do that and you try to do it, the law's still applying, golden rule is still applying, but you're in a state of denial. You're now going to experience karma, not as like someone took a record of the things you did wrong and you did this and you did this and therefore you're going to have to be punished by doing this and this. You yourself will inflict the consequences because you are choosing them. You are choosing to be in this state of, I believe my brother's a sinner, which must mean I believe I'm a sinner. Because I can only see them as guilty if I'm guilty. I can only see them as innocent if I'm innocent. So you get into this mindset where you're now hurting yourself through your attitude, but thinking that you're only hurting the other. At some point, you're going to experience what you've chosen to do to yourself. And this is the Course's idea of karma, rather than the idea of like sort of a separate keeping score. You didn't do this right, and so you're going to have to be reincarnated as a pig or something. It's more like you do it to yourself. You make yourself suffer as a result of choosing. You may have thought that you only chose to believe that your brother was a sinner because of what he did, but then the next time around, you're now conscious of the part of your mind where you were hurting yourself and accusing yourself of being a sinner, and it now seems like the roles are reversed in how it plays out in your life experiences, and now you're the sinner. And so now you see the flip side of the coin, because now you see the other side of the separation that was in the denial of the golden rule, where you thought everything applied to them and not me, and now it applies to you and not them, because you were already doing that. You were just doing it unconsciously, and you haven't really learned that neither of you are sinners, and the purpose of that karma isn't to punish. It's your choice. You've done it to yourself, and now you need to recognize that neither you or your brother are guilty. That ends the karma. It ends the choice, the decision to suffer. Secret of salvation, that you're doing it to yourself, and if you don't choose to do it to yourself, you do not need to be suffering. So the really tricky part is this unawareness that when your mind is split and you're being ego, you don't seem to have awareness that what you do to others, you're doing to yourself. It seems as if you actually can get away with it, that somehow in your awareness, in your perception, something can apply to them and not you. Look at them, they're the one wearing the strange costume and you're not the one wearing it, so they're the idiot, not you. And all these kind of ways that we justify and explain it, thinking that stuff literally doesn't apply to both of us. And that is the block. It's the blocks to awareness that are keeping you from recognizing or even seeing or even being aware of how, when you find your brother guilty, it makes you guilty. When you find them sinful, it makes you sinful. When you try to hurt them, it hurts you. It's still happening in you, and you won't realize why you feel shit, but you feel it because you're doing it to yourself. So it's kind of like either you don't do anything harmful to either of you, or you do something harmful to both of you. And this is why the body is a device for separation. It comes between both of you. It's an attack on both of you. It tries to get in the way of your relationship, your holy relationship. So this is where it gets humbling, and you start realizing that you're not having humility. If you can now realize, every time I try to attack someone else, I hurt myself. Every time that I'm finding someone else guilty, I'm going to experience some suffering. And just coming to realize that you don't want to suffer anymore. You don't want to feel like shit. You don't want to feel upset and angry, losing your peace, unhappy. And that's going to have to mean giving up the ego weapons of separation, these devices for separation, these dynamics of emphasizing inequalities. One example of which is where you think that you're right and someone else is wrong, and you get all bent out of shape trying to prove why your truth is true and their truth is not true. You kind of are going to have to give that up, because while you're doing that, you cannot experience peace. You're emphasizing inequality. You cannot recognize your brother as yourself. You cannot see the Christ in both of you if you're doing that. So this is where would I rather be right or happy comes in, because when you're trying to be right, you're trying to use the ego, essentially, by saying that whatever's true of me is not true of you. You're doing something wrong, and the wrongness is over there, it's not over here. I'm in denial of how I'm making myself wrong. I'm in denial of the fact that I am hating myself because I don't love myself, that I'm hating myself, and then I'm seeing the hate in you as well, because I see it in both of us, because now it's now filtering my perception of myself and my brother. So you cannot continue with that righteousness, justification, victimhood, justified anger, all those things where they're the sinner and not you. You have to be willing to stop doing those things if you want to be happy, because the happiness can only be there if you don't hate yourself. And the only way not to hate yourself is not to hate other people. The golden rule always applies. It applies all the time. So it's kind of like, I kind of found this kind of humbling to realize when it says those who are sick do not love themselves. Those who are sick, i.e. suffering in any way, must have attacked themselves. So if I'm unhappy, I have attacked myself. If I'm finding other people wrong, I have attacked myself. If I'm accusing my brother of sin, it is my sin that I believe that I've sinned, and now I'm trying to put it on them as well, because now it applies to both of us. And so that means if I cannot continue being harmful, thinking that I'm not getting harmed, if I want to be happy and at peace, I have to also grant other people the same right, the same truth, the same recognition and equality. I cannot have something that others don't have. I cannot have happiness if I'm not acknowledging the happiness in other people. If I'm making them unhappy, I cannot avoid making myself unhappy. So whereas before it's like you think, okay, I can get away with this. I'm finding them guilty, and it's not me. I'm able to convince myself and perceive in such a twisted way that it looks like this is where the truth and innocence is, and that's where the guilt and sin is. That state of denial, you have to be willing to not do that anymore, to not kind of play that game, to not participate in the unconsciousness that something you're not doing to you, that somehow you're separate from the effects, you're somehow escaping the consequences of your choice. So like you have people that get really pissed off at politicians and groups and companies that do bad stuff, and they put up protests and get all worked up and angry about all the bad, nasty stuff that these people are doing, while simultaneously believing that they are holy and innocent and pure and loving, that you somehow can be in a state of love, having those kind of perceptions, that you can be a loving person who just happens to hate the government, a loving person who hates the child abusers, a loving person who finds the person guilty of war crimes, but I'm loving. A loving person who points a finger and says, you are a sinful son of a bitch, you deserve to die, but I'm pure and I'm holy. And if you watch it in yourself, you will notice that whenever you're angry and upset, you cannot be happy. Whenever you're judging and finding people wrong, you cannot experience peace. When you're offended by anyone or anything, you're saying they have the power to cause me to be upset, and now I am upset, and now I'm justified in my anger, and it's your fault, not mine. I'm holy and innocent, but I'm angry. I'm an angry son of a bitch, son of God, and it's your fault. You lose your peace. And so it's like, how many times does it take to go through this same lesson, having conflict with others, not recognizing that what applies to them applies to you, thinking that you get away with it every time, that you're so pure and innocent and holy, that they are the place where the guilt is, that you are separate from the guilt and cannot be accused in any way. You're not doing anything wrong. You're just the innocent, helpless victim. And this is why this is very controversial, that victims are victimizers, victims are attackers. And how it's set up and how it happens in events and how people make things happen where they can look like they're unfairly treated, that they choose abuse, they want to suffer, they make themselves sick and disabled. This is very controversial, difficult to accept stuff that people want to die, and they make this bad stuff happen so that they can get away with murder by saying, I'm having this great big suffering and it's because of you, it's because of that, it's because of them, and I didn't choose it. And therefore I'm disowning the sin. And what sin is it that I'm disowning? It's the sin, the belief in sin, that I believe I killed God and his son and got away with it. And now I'm making myself sick and suffer in order to try to prove that I didn't do it and pin it on someone else other than myself. And so all those states of victimhood, suffering, sickness, dying, unfairly treated, being victimized, being abused even, in the most horrifying ways, is chosen. And that includes every possible disgusting example you can think of. This is the truth. This is the secret of salvation. It is the law of the golden rule that whatever someone is experiencing, they're trying to make others experience. Sick bodies are accusers as a result, because now you've attacked your own body as a result of trying to attack someone else. If you use the body for attack, the body now gets attacked. And Jesus says clearly in that part that the plans you made for your brother, don't be deluded in thinking that they're the one that's going to receive the consequences, because the plans you made for them, in your attacking and your accusing, you are going to receive those consequences. You're going to do it to yourself, and you're not going to be able to escape responsibility for making yourself suffer, and that all of your suffering is chosen. No one dies without their own consent. You cannot be hurt unless you hurt yourself. And this is all tied into the golden rule and the dynamics of the thought systems, that if you want to be free, and it's the only way to be free of a suffering and abuse and sickness and death, is to own up to having put it there yourself. You made sickness and death, and therefore you can abolish both. Owning up to the fact that you wanted to die, you had a death wish based on sin. Owning up to the fact that in your attempts to find your brother sinful, you have made yourself suffer. That as you've used the body for attack, and you've tried to attack, the ego uses the body as a weapon to try to attack others. As you attack through the body must be attacked, because you must be equal to what is outside. You must receive the effects that you are causing at all times. You must receive the effects that you cause at all times. If you try to cause something to someone else thinking that you will escape the effects, you won't escape the effects, and you will still suffer. Because even though you're unaware of how you're hurting yourself, you are doing so. You're responsible for everything that happens to you. You are the one making yourself unhappy every time you tried to make others unhappy. Every accusation, every judgment, every condemnation of sinfulness is against yourself. Those who are sick do not love themselves. They are not loving people. They are people who have attacked themselves. They don't love themselves, so therefore they must therefore be unloving towards themselves. They have a view of themselves that they don't deserve love, therefore they deserve punishment, therefore they deserve suffering, therefore they deserve condemnation and sin, and to suffer and die. Self-attack. All attack is self-attack. So then the person might not be fully conscious of how they're doing that or why they're doing that, but they're doing it. And now they're suffering and they don't know why, and where did this come from, and who chose it and who put it there. They did, but they're in denial, and they want to use it as an opportunity to find someone else guilty of the sin, and so they want to stay in suffering in order to have a good reason to prove that everyone else is the sinner. That we willingly want to suffer and die in order to try to assuage the guilt of the sin against God. Put it on someone else, put a picture of crucifixion, which is a suffering body, in front of the eyes of everyone else to try to say, brother, at your hand I die, you caused me, therefore you did this, I didn't cause this. Even though you caused it, and even though your mind causes the effects and puts the symptoms in your body and attacks your own body and your own self and then blames it on someone else, all within the golden rule, all still compliant with the law, not escaping the law, because you can't do anything to anyone else without doing it to yourself. And as I say, it's the only reason that we continue to hurt other people is because we're not aware of how it's hurting ourselves. We're not even monitoring our feelings. We're not observing the effects it has on ourselves. We're in denial. We have this huge volume of unconscious guilt and sin that we're putting out to others. We're seeing ourselves as victims in order to keep it covered up. Talk about ego stuff, and then ego stuff starts happening. Did this to myself. It's only because we have blocks to awareness that is covering up the activity and the mechanism of self-attack. That your mind is the cause. This is a cause and not effect. Your mind is the cause of everything that happens to your body, everything that you experience and feel. It's all coming out of you. And whether it's good or bad or suffering or happiness or health or sickness, it's all coming out of you. And you're responsible for putting it there and choosing it. No matter what it is, no matter how it seems to come about or who seems to do it to you, it's still true. The secret of salvation is still true at all times. There are no exceptions. You do it to yourself, but you have this sort of area of your mind that you're not aware of, where it is choosing and causing and believing in sin and attacking you. And you're not seeing it, so you don't think you're doing it. And so that's where you've got to remove these blocks to awareness to start realizing that the golden rule has always been applying to me. It's always been in effect. Every time that I get angry with other people, I get to suffer. Every time I try to be right, I become wrong. Every time that I think someone else is guilty, I lose my peace. Every time that I hate someone, I stop being aware of my love. So I am experiencing the consequences of what I'm trying to pretend I am escaping. I am experiencing the effects of my causing. And so gradually, as we remove these blocks, we're going to become very, very aware that whatever I am experiencing, I am choosing. Whatever I am experiencing, I am causing. Myself is ruler of the universe. And there's nothing I can choose that I escape the effects of. There's nothing that I can believe that doesn't have an effect on myself. There's nothing that I can perceive in others that I don't perceive in myself. And owning up, therefore, to being the cause of everything that I experience, being the cause, and not being able to be free from the effects. That everything I give, I receive. Everything I do, I receive it. Every attitude I have about others, I am included in the attitude, and I have it about myself. There's a line in the Song of Prayer that says something like that those who try to condemn others and put them into hell must be in hell with them. So the difference between the ego system and the Holy Spirit system is, in the ego, what applies to me doesn't apply to you. In the Holy Spirit system, whatever applies to me does apply to you. And if it applies to everyone and the whole sonship, it's true of everyone at once. And here's an interesting thing, that the ego thinks that it has the ability to discern objectively, to be neutral, to be impartial and unbiased, and able to look upon the world and judge it and evaluate who is being sinful and who is being innocent, what is okay behavior, what isn't, what is spiritual, what is evil, that it can somehow have this ability to be so objective and detached from what it sees that it can actually discern that person is actually guilty and this one isn't. And it does not have this ability. It's a fiction. And when you're having denial and you're in the face of innocence, you believe that you have this ability, that somehow you're not involved in or not equal with the things that you're observing. And so now you think, I'm innocent, but I can tell that you're guilty. Therefore now you're claiming that you're aware of being innocent yourself. You're perfectly innocent, but you see guilt in a brother, and it seems real. It's not possible. So the truth is that if you see guilt in your brother, you are seeing it in yourself. You are being guilty, and you're seeing the guilt outside of you in everywhere you look. You can't see past it. So you can only find everyone to be guilty because you're guilty, regardless of whether they're innocent or guilty. And then by the same token, if you really are innocent, you can only see the innocence of everyone. And now you're blind to guilt. And now you can only look at innocence because you are innocent, and now you see innocence everywhere you look. So even if the person is guilty, you can't even tell that they're guilty. You can only find them innocent. Which means that you can never really discern whether or not someone else is guilty or innocent. You don't have an ability to distinguish from your own truth, from your own perception, from your own what applies to you. You don't have a separate ability to say, that person's being guilty, I'm being innocent, that person's innocent, I'm guilty. It's a fiction that you have this ability. It's the ego's belief that it is just neutrally just evaluating, this is this and that's that, and without any bias, without any without making it be what it looks like, without contributing to it in any way, just sitting on a fence and judging that that person's guilty. But over here, behind this wall of separation, I'm innocent, that person's guilty, that person's innocent, that person's guilty. It's an illusion. It's a total fiction that you can even do that, because all you can see in your brother is yourself. All you can see in them is what applies to you. If they seem guilty, it's you believing that you are guilty. And a little bit of your own self-guilt is showing up outside. This is why the Holy Spirit can only find everyone to be innocent. This is why God does not judge and condemn, because they're not aware of guilt because they aren't guilty. They're not aware of sin being real because they haven't sinned. So the humbling thing here is the truth being revealed, that whatever I try to do to someone else, I'm doing it to myself. I am included in the effects of my causing. I cannot cause someone else to be wrong and sinful without believing that I'm wrong and sinful. And so that means every time that I thought I was getting away with it, every time that I thought I could find someone guilty without being upset in any way, seemingly, I must have been hurting myself. Those who are sick do not love themselves. So if I'm finding somebody guilty, I am not loving myself. It has to be true. And so now that reveals that, do I really want to not love myself? Do I really want to love myself deeply and fully? If I want to do so, I have to give up trying to find people guilty and sinful. You cannot do both. You cannot be in love as a loving person, as a truly innocent person, finding others to be sinful and guilty. So even regardless of what you seem to do to anyone else, or whether you hurt them or upset them or whatever, it's a matter that you're actually hurting yourself. If you're not loving yourself, you're hurting yourself. And that you have been hurting yourself all the times that you thought you weren't. When you thought someone else was receiving the suffering, it was really a part of your mind receiving the suffering in a disassociated way. You were really hurting yourself. So it's kind of like this is the basis for spirituality, where be harmless, teach only love, because that's what you are. Be free of suffering by not trying to make anyone suffer. You have a vested interest in only relating to yourself with love. If you attempt to condemn anyone, you will suffer. If you try to use the body for attack, your body, yourself, is going to suffer. If you I'm just kind of moved by this whole thing, because it's so deep and so absolute. It kind of comes down to, I don't want to hurt anymore. And the hurting is a two-edged sword. It's that I don't want to feel hurt. I want to be at peace. I want to be happy. And that means I need to stop hurting myself and learn to love myself and allow myself to receive love and to extend love so that I'm causing love and then receive the effects of that extension, be included in the love. It sort of seems selfish almost, but in a good way, because you're supposed to not hurt yourself. And if we're getting really honest here, everyone who dies has hurt themselves. No one has died without their own consent. No one has become hurt unless they have hurt themselves. The secret of salvation, every death is a suicide. So we've got a world filled with people who are hurting themselves. A world full of people that keep on attacking themselves, that have a death wish. That we want to suffer. We choose to suffer. We keep making ourselves unhappy and suffer. And doing it to ourselves, it is literally, you could say the whole ego thought system is suicidal. It is a death wish. It's an attempt to make yourself suffer and die. And to it be at your own hand, your own cause, that you've caused it yourself and chosen it because you don't think God will forgive you and you think you sinned and that you deserve to be punished. And this is the thing about the guilt, that once you believe you've sinned and you think you're guilty of it and that you don't deserve forgiveness and you think it really happened, you're automatically going to believe on your own, of your own choosing, that you agree that you should be punished. That you want to hurt yourself because of what you did. With the shame and the regret and the sense of guilt and obligation and atoning and remorse and unworthiness, that you go into a state of this guilt. This guilt tells you, I deserve to suffer. That I should suffer. Not only should I suffer, but I'm going to make myself suffer. This is the suicidal death wish that we have as a result of believing that we really sinned. That people are literally hurting themselves to the point of death. And no one is supposed to be dying. No one is supposed to be suffering. No one is supposed to be guilty, unworthy, shameful. No one is supposed to be believing that they sinned against God because it's not possible. We're only supposed to be loving, and we're only supposed to be loving ourselves and sharing it with everyone else. That what applies to me applies to you. If I love myself, I will love you as well. That love is the only sane choice. Otherwise, if in my right mind I decide I'm not going to love you, instantly I'm going to not love myself. And that's going to be hurtful and painful and suffering. It's a decision. And it's unfortunate that this whole world is filled with people trying to die. Let's be honest. The whole world is full of people who have the best intentions, who sometimes seem to live a while and do good things, but they die because deep down they hate themselves and they think they're guilty of sin and they want to suffer and they think they deserve it and they make it happen. They make sure that it happens. They cause it. They choose it. They want it. You've got to get really radically honest if you want to unearth these ego deceptions, to really own up and admit to the truth that all suffering is chosen, no matter who you are, no matter what age you are, no matter what you've done in life. Every single form of suffering is self-inflicted, and we're all trying to hurt ourselves, and it's not God's will. It is not God's will that you suffer. God does not want anyone to suffer. God's will for me is perfect happiness, for everyone to be perfectly happy forever, just joyous and alive and exuberant with life and just celebrating. In a state of deep love for oneself and for all brothers. Everyone is supposed to love everyone. Everyone is supposed to only love, teach only love, for that is what you are, is the only sane way to be, but it's going to have to include your loving yourself. You cannot love other people if you don't love yourself, because then you're going to say, oh, sure, I'm being really loving, look at me go. I'm loving these people, I'm sacrificing my time, I'm volunteering, I'm doing all this to raise children and putting aside my selfish needs and being selfless and all this stuff, because the ego has a version of selflessness that is basically sacrifice, where what applies to others doesn't apply to you, and so they get all the love, all the attention and all the forms of whatever, and now you don't get it, and you don't get included, and you don't give yourself, you don't receive, you don't let yourself get the love. It's inequality. It's hurtful to yourself. It's like someone is laying down their life and trying to sacrifice and suffer and die as an offering to the God of death, to say, if I will just prostrate myself before you and lie on the ground dead, then I am being as giving as I can be. That is absolute bullshit. It is devoid of receiving. It is only giving without receiving. You have to be included in the receiving of the effects of what you cause. You have to be included in the love. You have to be part of the sharing. You have to extend the love in order to receive the love. It's not really love if you're not receiving it either. If you really want to extend love, you've got to extend God's love. And it's unconditional, and it applies to you as much as it applies to everyone else. And so you experience the love toward yourself and towards your brother at the same time. And in that love, there is no harm, there's no attack, there's no hurting yourself, there's no suicide, there's no death wish, there's no sin or guilt or fear or punishment or death. There's only love, only life, only the truth is true. And at that point, you would be in full alignment with the golden rule, obeying the law of God instead of being in denial of it. And now it is actually working for you, not against you. So when you go into ego, you're going against the golden rule, and now it seems as though the golden rule now hurts you, because now whatever you try to do, this ego and attacking, it causes you to be attacked. So now it's almost as if the golden rule's working against you, because now you try to attack thinking you can get away with it, and then you get attacked. There's a consequence, there's the effect. And so now your denial of the golden rule is hurting you. When you get back to the heavenly way, you're now in alignment with the golden rule. It's now working with you. You're now only giving love, and now you're only receiving love, and now it's working for your benefit, and now it's helping you. It's feeding you. It's supplying you with everything you could ever need and want, because you're now willing to receive as much as you give, and now there's perfect equality, and you're giving love, so you're receiving love, and you're not hurting anything. Either you hurt yourself and others, or you love yourself and others. This is the only truth. The illusion that you hurt only another and not yourself, or only yourself and not another, is ego bullshit. It is not true. It is denial. And the golden rule still applies in that state, and you're still going to suffer because you're thinking that you can choose to attack without being suffering from it. And then you go and do it thinking, oh, the golden rule doesn't apply to me, I'm not going to get attacked. So you go attack, and now you get attacked. Because it does apply. You cannot escape this law, no matter where you are. So you have to love yourself. Those who love themselves do not hurt themselves, and they do not become sick because they love themselves. Those who don't love themselves do become sick because they don't love themselves. If and when you love yourself, it will heal you of the sickness that you caused when you weren't loving yourself. Love is healing. It restores and repairs and undoes the consequences of your wrong decision. Holy Spirit will undo these consequences and heal you if you will let Him. And the love shines away the darkness. It shines away the consequences of sin. It reverses death. It undoes suffering, heals sickness, produces resurrection. Love is life. It produces a restoration to life and an overcoming of death and suffering forever. If you don't want to ever die ever again, only love. Otherwise you'll hurt yourself. So this is where Jesus says, if you use the body for attack, it becomes attacked because you attack it yourself, becomes sick, and then it dies. But if you use the body to bring the word of God to those who have it not, the word of God is love and life, truth. If you bring that and express that through the body, extend it through the body to others, to heal them and perform miracles and to raise the dead and restore life, then the body is healed by that love, because now you have a loving attitude towards yourself, which heals you and shines away sickness. The body now cannot be sick, nor can it die. It literally cannot be sick because there's so much love, so much healing presence coming through it that sickness cannot take hold. It's so strong. The power of the mind is so strong. The mind must be stronger than the body. Every miracle demonstrates this. The mind is so strong in its miraculousness that it has to reverse sickness, and now it becomes impossible for the body to get sick because only you do it to yourself, and now you're choosing never to make yourself sick. Jesus says, swear not to die, you holy Son of God. Don't choose to make yourself die. Don't choose to make yourself sick. Don't choose to make yourself unhappy. Don't attack yourself. This is the central teaching in the Course. So then the body gets to a place where it cannot become sick because you are so healing and loving that you do not put sickness in the body. You don't believe in attack, and you stop attacking yourself. You only love yourself, and so that love can only produce health. And it heals away any sign of darkness. It's such a bright light that it doesn't allow darkness. So the body cannot become sick, and it cannot die. And Jesus even talks about how it may even become impervious to aging and weather and all these other laws that you made up that you thought it had to obey, that the body can now be in a state of perfect protection from the world, where it cannot suffer, cannot become sick, cannot die, and therefore, in order to leave the body and go to heaven, you're not about to just suddenly attack the body and strike it down. You're not about to suddenly make it sick and then have it die of cancer or heart attacks or whatever bullshit. That's not a very good teaching, and that's not the way that you would be. You would only love, only heal. So the only way that the body can now go without dying is to make it disappear, to make it vanish by shining it away, shining your love so strongly that the body disappears. It literally vanishes because it's nothing. Jesus says, my body disappeared because I had no more illusions about it. It literally vanished. That is the only way to leave the dream. The dream of death is not left by death, it's left by truth. That truth transcends the body and makes it disappear. The body doesn't just fall on the ground and die and rot. It disappears. That's the elegant, dignified exit. Rather than leaving a stinking corpse for everyone else to clean up. So anyway, this is what's been coming to me at the moment, and it's really making me think deeply about what I'm doing to myself. Why am I hurting myself? Why don't I love myself? Why do I think I'm getting away with attack and escaping the consequences? Do I really want to carry on being hurt by myself? And do I want to become harmless toward myself and others? Do I want to only love and recognize the connection between my causing and my effects, and to receive as much as I give and accept love and be only love, and to give up all of the ego weapons of mass destruction, psychological weapons that only you can be hurt by. To forgive yourself, to be free of suffering because you no longer make yourself suffer, that you want to be happy instead of being right, i.e. imbalanced and unequal to others, in denial. That only the truth is true, choosing only to represent the truth and only to represent love and life, and giving up and surrendering ego. I'm going to stop there. Something to think about. Love, because if you don't, lightning bolts. Not that some people take that to mean that you're guilty. If you don't choose to abide by the law of God, you're going to be struck down. Not true. If you don't abide by the law of God, you're going to strike yourself down. And you don't have to. All you have to do is abide with the law, and then you will not suffer ever again, and you can live forever. It is not God's will that you suffer. You're not guilty. Love is the answer. Bye for now.